Hey folks, you're watching Connor, and this is episode 3, part 2 in the weekly fitness vlog. What are you going to see in this episode? In this episode, I talk about why my training sessions only last 15 minutes and how to get the body you want whilst keeping your workout times short. Are you ready? Let's go. Typically in part 2 we would do a workout and I would commentate over the what I'm doing and the why, right? In this video though, I wanted to give a broader perspective, right, in terms of why I'm doing the training that I'm doing, and what it is that I'm doing. So to kick things off, I'm going to talk about what kind of training I actually do, right? So the baseline that the training I do comes from, my workouts typically last about 15 minutes. I typically train, so yeah, my entire workout lasts around 15 minutes most days. Now, I would do 3 days on and 1 day off. So over the course of, 4 days, that's 45 minutes of training, right? Within that, the baseline, and I say baseline because I adapt it based off different things, right? But the baseline is over the course of an 8-day window, I would target these 6 main body groups, or at least what I would deem to be the 6 main body groups. So what would they be at a baseline? Well, it would be chest, triceps, biceps, shoulder, back, and legs, right? Ran out of fingers there. But yeah, so it'd be those 6 main body groups, and the reason I say adaptive is because, sometimes one might grow a little bit more than the other, so I'll rein it back and then maybe do a little bit of something else. I'll adapt it, but that is the baseline that I start from. Within there, then depending on the body part, sometimes I'll do 3 sets, sometimes I'll do 4 sets with 2-minute rest periods across the board. Why 2 minutes? Just works best for me, right? Like, I find that if I do less than that, then I'm not really fully replenished for the next set, and if I do more than that, then I'm just kind of wasting time and messing around, right? So that's why. So yeah, workouts 15 minutes with 2-minute rest periods, and every workout is somewhere between 3 to 4 sets. So that tells you what I do, but it doesn't tell you why. And for a lot of you, you probably associate going to the gym with being there for an hour and a half, or 2 hours, or whatever it is. So when someone comes along and says that they train for 15 minutes a day, there's some explanation required. So I think it's best that I explain why it is that I train the way that I train. When determining how it is that you should train, you have to look at the why first, right? So why is it that I'm training at all? What am I trying to do? I'm trying to build muscle and burn fat. Those are my goals, right? Now, the burning fat thing is going to come a lot from my diet, more so than the training itself. But when I'm training, I'm focusing on how to build as much muscle as possible. What am I not trying to do? I'm not trying to build strength or power of any kind. I'm not trying to get stronger. So a lot of the things that you see training wise are going to be geared towards getting stronger, either because that's someone's goal, like if they're a power lifter, they want to get stronger, they want to move the weight from A to B, or because they don't know any better, right? So they associate strength and muscle as the same thing, which they are not. And you can tell by looking at a bodybuilder and looking at a powerlifter. What does a powerlifter look like? A powerlifter looks like a really big guy with a lot of muscle, but also a lot of fat, because it's more beneficial for them to have a lot of fat because it makes it easier to move more weight the heavier you are. Whereas a bodybuilder is more focused on staying lean whilst having as much muscle as possible. So if I'm in trying to build muscle, I'm not trying to build strength. So how do I build muscle then? Like, what makes your body build muscle? There's a lot of principles. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible for the sake of the video. What you're focused on when you're trying to build muscle is time under tension and pumping as much blood to the muscle that you're trying to work as possible. Now, with that in mind, it's important to understand that your muscles do not understand weight. They do not understand numbers. They do not understand anything other than the tension in which is being applied. So when you see me doing 3 to 4 sets, my muscles don't know whether I'm doing 3 sets or 50 sets. They just understand the tension in which I'm applying. So when you see someone in the gym who's doing 50 sets, typically they're not very good at applying tension to the muscle. So it takes them 50 sets to feel like they have worked their chest or their legs or however, or whatever body part they're training. I can do in 3 or 4 sets what they can do in 50, and oftentimes more efficiently. So I've trained people that, I'll ask them, like, okay, we're going to be doing chest here today. Typically, how many sets would you do for chest? And they would say, 50 sets or whatever. And then I'll go, okay, cool. Today we're going to be doing 4. And then they'll kind of look at me confused, right? And then at the end of the 4 sets, they go, oh, okay, my chest has now worked far better than I ever did in 50. So why is that? Well, it's because typically people are so focused on moving the weight from A to B that they're not focused on actually using their muscles, and it's not the same thing. So if you quickly jerk a weight in a direction, you're using your strength or your central nervous system for the most part, and a little bit of your muscles. They're not completely removed from it, right? But for the most part, you're using your central nervous system. Whereas when you're slowly controlling something and flexing the muscle, and rather than using the weight as a determiner of how much muscle you have, and instead viewing the weight as resistance for you contracting the muscle, that's how you're going to actually activate the muscle, right? So your goal when you're building muscle isn't to move the weight from point A to B like a powerlifter does. Your goal is to flex that muscle, and the weight just happens to be there to add extra resistance. And that's why in many cases when someone starts off, you can get them building muscle with no weight, because the act of flexing that muscle, more so than they did the previous week, is going to make them build muscle because it's more than they did the previous week, which comes into the next principle, which is called progressive overload. Now, what does progressive overload mean? The simple answer is you progressively make it more difficult as the weeks go on, right? And there's multiple ways to do that, but most people think that the only way to apply progressive overload is to increase the weight or increase your reps or whatever it is. But you can also apply progressive overload by activating your muscles in a more efficient way. Typically, I think the worst form of progressive overload, now this is my opinion, right? Because there's plenty of people who lift heavy weights and put on muscle, so the truth is you can do it either way, right? This is just my personal preference. But the reason I think progressive overload is a suboptimal, increasing the weight is a suboptimal form of progressive overload is because it doesn't scale very well, particularly with beginners. If you've been lifting with phenomenal form for 5 years straight, of course you're going to need to increase the weight because there's nothing else you can do. But for beginners, I think it's a really suboptimal way to do things, because when you continually increase the weight week after week, their form tends to get worse and worse and worse, because as the weight gets heavier, it's harder for them to control it. And the less control they do, the less they're activating their muscles, and therefore the less they're actually building their muscles. So when I'm training, I'm focusing on controlling the muscle as hard as possible. And that means I can really only do it for 3 to 4 sets, right? Because they tap out pretty quickly when you actually know how to activate them, rather than someone who's moving the weight for 40 to 50 sets and they're not actually activating their muscle. Now that we know how to build muscle, why is it that my workouts typically last 15 minutes? Well, there's a few reasons. One is because when you're actually really good at activating your muscles, they are going to tap out quickly, right? And I'm trying to stimulate the muscle, I'm not trying to annihilate the muscle. And it's important that I don't do so much damage in the gym that I can't then recover from it, right? Because if you were to say, do more damage in it, because that's essentially what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to cause stress to the muscle, but not so much that you can't actually heal from. Because if you do more stress to your muscle than you can heal by the next workout, then the muscles don't actually have time to grow, right? So you have to be very careful about how much stimulation you actually do. The goal isn't to batter yourself to the point, like if it's leg day, to the point where you can't walk the next day, right? Because if you're then doing leg day a week later, you're probably not going to be able to recover from that, right? Like that kind of damage takes a lot longer than a week to recover from. So I'm going in, I'm trying to stimulate it, I'm trying to pump blood to the muscle, but I'm not trying to destroy it, right? I'm just trying to stimulate enough muscle growth that I can recover from and not go above and beyond that, because it's actually going to hinder me. It's not going to help me. Okay, so that's the first thing to consider: stimulation, not annihilation. The next thing to consider is a mental thing, right? So motivation. Okay, because my workouts are like 15 minutes. Look, I'll be honest. My willpower's pretty poor, right? It is pretty suboptimal, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I'd love to go to the gym, I just can't be bothered." And then I'm like, "Well, I train 15 minutes a day," so I completely agree with you, right? Like, I don't like spending really long periods of time in the gym. I enjoy my time in the gym, but there was a time where I didn't, right? And that was when I was doing a lot of rehab exercises for my injury, and that stuff took ages, right? Like, it made my workouts last like 45 minutes to an hour, and it bored the hell out of me. Like, I couldn't stand going that long, and that was like the only time I've ever thought about giving up, was just because it was boring the life out of me, and I just couldn't stick at it for that long period of time, right? Whereas when it's 15 minutes, I just stick in my music. I go out and it's like 3-4 songs. That's the way I look at it, right? It's like, if I'm doing 3-4 sets, it's like one song per set, and then, I have a little song and a dance in between my rest periods. Yeah, like, I enjoy it, right? But I wouldn't enjoy it if it was an hour a day, so I'd be far less likely to actually stick to it in the long term if my workouts were longer. So that's a mental reason as to why I keep my workouts short. The last reason I keep my workouts short is because I feel as though the quality of my workouts goes down the longer it goes on for, right? So there comes a point where you get what's called diminishing returns when you're training for so long, right? So diminishing returns, what is diminishing returns for those of you who don't understand the term? Because it's not a bodybuilding term, right? It's just a term. So diminishing returns is, trying to explain it simply, it's when you start off, you kind of put in a certain amount of effort and you get a certain amount of reward. But the more effort you put in, you get less reward, right? That's a simple version of diminishing returns. So let's say, you put, I don't know, £5 into a machine and it gives you 5 balloons. And then you put in £5 again and it's only giving you 4 balloons. And then you put in £5 again, it's only giving you 3 balloons, and so on and so forth. It's like, right, okay, I'm going to stop sticking my money in here because I'm not getting the initial return that I got, right? So how does that relate to your training? Well, with your training, the longer you train for, there's kind of two factors come in. One, the quality of your workout is decreasing because your energy levels are dipping dramatically. So your ability to control the muscle is going down because your muscles have a lot less energy in them to do so. So it's better, I always say when I'm training people, like, I'd rather you give me 6 good reps than 20 bad ones, right? So it's better to do everything with clean form and with maximum effort than to kind of like half-ass it and drag it on for like an hour, right? That said, the other factor is your testosterone, right? Your growth hormone. So this is where we get a little bit more scientific, but I understand, most people watching this are going to be beginners, so I'll try and keep it as simple as possible. A lot of studies with regards to testosterone and exercise show that, now it depends on the person, right? Like, different people have different levels of testosterone and hormone and all that sort of thing, so it does depend on the person. But generally speaking, the testosterone increases during the early stages of an exercise, then it plateaus out, and then the production actually starts to dip after a while. So let's say, for example, an extreme example would be if you were training for like 4 hours, you would start to produce a stress hormone called cortisol, which is not going to help you in your growth, unless, of course, now bearing in mind that a lot of people who train for 4 hours, it's because they're actually supplementing testosterone, so to speak, right? They're injecting themselves. So if you're doing it naturally, you can only produce so much of this testosterone, so you're limited in how long you can train for before you get those diminishing returns, right? So because I'm doing it naturally and I'm not having any extra testosterone, and frankly, I think I have quite low testosterone even at a base level. Like, you hear my voice is fairly high pitched, and can't really grow a beard, and I'm like 26, so yeah, my testosterone's pretty low. So 15 minutes just seems pretty optimal, right? Like, I can feel the testosterone and the energy levels going up, but there comes a point where if I was to continue training, it would kind of plateau off and then it would go down. So I like to leave it on a spike where it's going up and it's going well, and that's what helps me build muscle in the long term.
I hope you've taken something from this video that you can use in your own personal fitness journey. As always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I will answer them all personally myself. Last little point, I just wanted to thank all of you that have subscribed so far. I hope you're benefiting from the content and will in the future also. I've been Connor, take care, and I'll see you next week.